Here we go.
Do it.
Okay, cool.
Here we go.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Coffin Talking, where we unravel the mysteries, embrace the peculiar, and find humor in the unconventional world of funerals and death. This is the moment you've all been waiting for. Scott is back.
Hi, Scott.
Yes. Holly, are you telling me that you have actually gotten feedback from people and say this, we are waiting for him to come back?
Yes, every episode we've released, someone has messaged and said, "Where is
Really?
Scott?"
Liar.
Well, I do want to say this, though, Scott. I've had an opportunity to meet and talk with a number of different people, and everything's all about Holly or visitor Scott.
I was going
about Frank, and that's okay. But the next podcast, I'm going to be doing the intro. It's time to be Holly.
I'm going to tell a story about Nelson.
It's funny. I was actually going to mention that I had also spoken to a number of people. A lot of them are friends, and that have said, "Oh, we love the podcast, and Holly's voice is just so great to listen to." And then I'll say, I've been on a few episodes as well, and they'll say, "Are you a member of the family?" or something along those lines. Oh,
Wait, what? Thought you were just a friend.
Yeah, friend of the family.
Friend of the family. More of an acquaintance. Don't push your luck.
Oh. Well, yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
Well,
so anything new? It's been a while. You want to catch up? You want to tell listeners what's been going on in your life?
Sure. We had the church that I am a part of. It's a group of all these young adults, and we had a concert this past Monday, so about a week ago, and it was all about I guess for those listening, we are filming this on Easter. It is Easter Sunday today.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a concert just about Christ and his life and everything that led up to his death, his resurrection. And so it was a great experience, and we got to sing, and it was really cool. Really cool. So that was a great thing. Dad, you and Mom were actually there.
Yep.
Monday night.
Yep.
So
I can attest to the.
Do you remember that?
Vaguely. No. It was very well done. Very well put together. Narration was wonderful. It was good.
What was the music? Was it all original music, or was it
There were a few things from, if anyone is familiar with The Lamb of God, there were a few things from that. There were a few also just contemporary. So I don't think that there was a single song that we did that was just specific to our religious denomination. But it was a lot of different songs and music from different writers, and it was very good, very powerful, very good time. So that was great. Yeah, that was a really good start to the week. And other than that, 2 weeks of tax season left.
Oh, counting down the days.
Counting down the days.
Well, 2 weeks of tax season left. What about those that extend?
Oh yeah, they will extend through October. So
That is
2 weeks.
For
yes, I'm
experience.
speaking from my experience. Expanding once again.
How was your week, Dad?
Good. It was yeah. As most people know, I've been here in Utah visiting family, so it's always good to see family.
Do most people know that?
Well, because of the previous podcast that we've just done, they would probably know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Scott, dude.
Yeah, I wasn't a part of that one, so
no one told me, so
Mm-hmm.
What about
Holly?
My week has been good. The only thing I'll share is that Nelson got neutered this week, and so he is in a cone, and he has to be for the next 14 days, and he hates it. He does this thing where he starts at one end of the room and he tries to back out of the cone. So he's just shaking his head, and he walks backwards the entire length of the room, trying to back out of it. So the poor cat, check out our Instagram, Coffiners. I'll post a picture of Nelson in a cone. But that's it. So nothing from me, just from Nelson. So, Scott, I think it's your turn to announce. Let's be Scrank.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, I forgot all about that.
Oh,
Let's be
I
Scrank.
didn't.
I was hoping that Holly had forgotten about that.
No, I think it's Scrank.
All right, Coffiners, it's time to be Scrank. That's the worst.
That's the worst.
No, this one is actually some of the questions that we have. I am excited about because a few of these are follow-up questions to some of the previously recorded episodes, and so if you can think back to those, and maybe Dad or Holly, as you're answering these, then you can kind of go back if you remember the name of the episode, and you can kind of say if you haven't heard this. I think you guys do that anyway. But the first one, for example, is a question from our friend Ray. She says, from the last episode, and this could be the last one that posted, from the last episode, was the footprint like the shape of a bare foot or like a shoe print?
Okay, so the question, first of all, is from Ray, a man. I think it's a man. But the episode that we're talking about is...
I apologize, Ray.
No problem. I'm sure he'll be laughing about it right now. The episode that he's referring to is the Intense.
An Intense Memorial.
An Intense Memorial. And
Intense.
So at the back end,
Proud of that.
when the grave was completed, they did a fresh rake through on the open or the completed grave site. So you see the lines or the furrows from the rake that's actually been raked across the dirt. And no one else was around that grave site except for me. And the grounds crew had left. And I just remembered looking down, and right at the base corner of that freshly raked grave site was a small little footprint. And the footprint was the footprint. It wasn't in a shoe. It was a footprint. So answer to your question, Ray, that was a footprint without a shoe. So just be aware of that. But very interesting story. And there was one other person there, I have to admit, that was that reporter. But I didn't bring her over and draw her attention to it at all because I didn't think that would be appropriate. But very interesting for me to have actually looked down and see that footprint. And that's when I asked, are you still here? So maybe that'll tease enough for people to go back to that episode and listen to it once again.
And we do have another follow-up from another previous podcast episode. This one, I will say, she probably wants us to disguise her name, but this was from the fictitious Lisa.
Oh, Lisa.
Oh, go ahead with the question.
She says, it is a follow-up from the episode, A Bad Case of Indigestion, which I'll read the question and then maybe you can give us a little bit of what happened in that episode.
Okay.
But she says, I'm interested to know what Frank's boss's reaction was when the wife was exhumed a second time and the ring was found on her finger, the ring that the boss witnessed being given to the husband at the first exhumation.
Okay, so if you go back to that episode and you remember, there was a number of times that the ring was given back and forth. So the first time that the father or the husband asked that his wife be exhumed, I mentioned it to my boss, and he said, well, it's going to be $3,000, Frank. And I was obligated to pay $1,500 of that because he thought that I had made the error in getting the ring back to the family. So that was his way of stating, well, if you want to do the exhumation, Frank, you're out of pocket $1,500. And I just thought, well, do you want the lawsuit or don't you? So we just went on ahead and had the exhumation. Of course, the ring was found. And that's when my boss, that first time, my boss said, see, and he just kind of let out a sigh. I can't believe that my own employees would forget to give the family a ring back.
Oh, gosh.
That type of a thing. So I paid the fee. It was okay, fine. But the second time it happened, he was present along with one other individual, and the ring was still there. And his reaction was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
He said that.
He said that twice. As the ring was given to the husband once again, he just shook his head and back and forth like, I can't believe it. And then he just walked out of the room. Didn't say anything more. Didn't offer me my $1,500 back. No. I still ended up paying the $1,500. And so I was never recompensated for that, what he considered first a major error on one of his employees' part.
And you didn't get anything else from him. That was the extent of the reaction that you noticed.
Yep, just unbelievable. And that was the only time he was present with that. It was that second go around. And unbelievable. I think he may have said, sorry, I didn't believe you. And
that's it.
Yeah, that's it. That was it. That was all.
You'd think you might have a bigger reaction to.
You would think.
Wow.
It was it was kind of low key. He kind of felt like it almost made it sound like he was being imposed upon, having to be there to witness it. But it was good that he was there, so that the third time there was a question that they had it.
Well, he's probably seen that before, so.
Oh, you know him.
Oh, yeah.
No. Okay.
I actually do find that interesting, just to touch on that. And for some people that maybe haven't heard a lot of the episodes, there are many instances where you experience something. And for example, the Free Hoodie episode, where you experience something and then a third party joins, being the police in that case when they were called.
Right.
And they just don't believe any of it. Nope. And they don't. But even being in that situation where he saw the ring be given the first time,
right,
and then the husband then claims, I don't have the ring, exhumed a second time, and the ring is back on this lady's finger. And the response is unbelievable. Sorry, I didn't believe you. What?
Yeah. Well, how's the problem I have with that one is the metaphysical stuff.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah.
It happens. But anyway, neither here nor there. It's what took place. So
very intriguing. A third, I guess a second follow-up question to that one. A friend of the family has asked if fictitious Lisa can join an episode in the future. And what do we say, Holly? What are you going to say?
Well, I am determined by the time this podcast is over that Lisa will agree. We will be holding Scott ransom.
Wow.
No, she's pretty adamant about not being on.
Yeah, but if our coffiners could show some support, send us an email, send us a DM requesting Lisa joins.
Come on, Lisa.
I just really think it'd be super interesting to get the perspective of a wife of a funeral director, a wife of a mortician, especially having lived in several mortuaries when you were first married. I think that'd be very interesting. But I guess she can't be bothered.
We'll see.
Wow. Okay. So if I'm not heard of until Lisa appears, then you know I'm being held ransom by my family. So that's great. Love you guys. So this next question, it is from Fred. And I looked at this question when Holly sent it to me and I thought, is this a joke? And then I asked Frank before, and apparently not. So here's the question. It's take it how you will. Here it is. It's Fred asks, does the US do anything like having composting areas for deceased individuals where they leave them for a while and then use that soil for fertilizer?
So looking at your face, Scott, it's phenomenal. Your face, like, is this true? No, it is true. And so it started within New York. And when you're talking about composting, it's called terramation, meaning earth cremation, or earthmation, meaning going back to earth. But it's called terramation, and it is a composting effort. There is not one in the state I currently work in. However, anyone that wants that, we do have to transfer their loved one to a state closest to us, which is Colorado at this point. So Colorado does it, and they do it. It's about a 4 to 5 month process. They charge us as a funeral home $4,200 to do that, plus whatever expenses the family incurs on this end. Individuals are generally not embalmed. They have to be arrived there in a natural state, and they are placed. And I don't know all the chemicals that are used or even the soil, but if you liken it to a compost mechanism that we in the anywhere, if you have a garden and you're doing composting, then just remember the organisms that are used, the microorganisms that are used, multiply that by 10 to 20. And then the individual is placed in what's called it's a tube. It's an enclosed tube. All of these compounds are put together and surrounding this individual, and then they rotate it every week. And it's like a big tumbler. So they have a handle. I think they have a handle, and it just automatically rotates through. And at the end of the 4 months, it generates a lot of soil. I've been told it's about 2 tons. And so once it's all completed, the family has the right to either come pick up that compost, which the 4 families that we've done through our facility so far have gone to Colorado to pick up the compost. So I don't know if they do it in back pickup trucks or what, but they do have that ability to pick it up, or they can donate it to either a local county for their fertilization of beds, flower beds, grassy areas, wherever soil is used, potting plants. But yeah, that soil is reused for a number of different things. But the family, two of the families had farms. They took it back and just tilled it right into the soil, because that's where the individual spent most of their life, was working on the farm. So they wanted him to go right back to the farm. So yes, it is possible, and it is happening. And I think the state I'm in, the legislature has it before them, and in July we should know if we are able to do it ourselves in the state that I work.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? And there's also, did we talk about?
Sorry, I didn't believe you.
They also have the aquamation as well, which is a water type of disintegration of the human body. And that's just heated water with lye and lime in the water. I'm sure there's other chemicals that are in there as well, but yeah, it slowly dissolves the body. So
very interesting. I do have a few follow-up questions on that, because okay. I genuinely did not know that this existed. I'm assuming that this is something that you have to opt into. You probably, maybe you know the answer to this, but can the family say, we want to use our loved one that passed away for this, if the loved one themselves did not say anything during their lifetime about it?
So if there was no pre-discussion, is that what you're saying, from
yes.
the deceased to the family? No, I think it becomes then a decision of the family. And that's like anything. If I came into a facility and said, I want my wishes put on paper that I want to be cremated. So, and then the family could still come in and make those changes, could still change it. Just because I put down my wishes doesn't mean that the family has to adhere to them. See what I'm saying? Mm. So in this case, it doesn't really matter if the wishes were enunciated or if the family themselves wanted to go ahead and do that from the very beginning. When an individual happens to pass away, let's have dad teramated. That's something like that. That's just a decision that could be made right as the death occurs. So it's very seldom that I would think that they were actually talking about it beforehand. But it is something that everyone's trying to go green, quote unquote, quote right now. The problem with terramation, and I'll be honest with you, and I don't know that much about it, excepting for what I've just described. I don't know what happens to the bone, because the terramation will break down the tissue. But the bone, the skeletal structure, I've got to call my friend who I've been working with there. He's invited me down to see his facility, and I may do that. But I want to know what happens to the bone. I didn't really get into that. I can't imagine that the bone would break down.
I wouldn't think so either.
Mm-mm.
The second follow-up question I had was really, it wasn't very serious at all. I was just wondering if there was because, sometimes you open somebody's wallet and they have like an organ donor card.
Right.
What if there was like a card for that?
I'm sure there are. I'm sure that there are cards that people can keep in their wallets for organ donation, cremation. If they have a pre-need, that's usually in their wallet so that they know who to contact, who the life insurance policy is with, or the pre-need policy. Yeah, I think there's little cards made for everything. As a matter of fact, we're in the process of making cards for individuals that have pre-needs so that when they pass away, that there's no question that we have a plan for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be an earth donor, though.
Yes. You can say, well, I'm not an organ donor, but if you wait till next harvest, stick around a little bit.
Yeah, that is new. And it's fairly new, by the way, just so you know. Did I say that it started in New York?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it started to make its way across the nation. And I think Florida, New York, and Colorado are actually the only states right now that are licensed to actually been given the permission to do those. So families are looking for that. You have to transfer them to one of those 3 states. And we're hoping to get, not hoping, but I'm pretty sure we'll be given the permission to have it done in July.
This next question is from Caden. Producer Caden.
Producer Caden?
The producer Caden, Holly, your husband.
Oh, that's great.
Anyway, he asks, if you have your own private property, do you have to get special permits to bury or spread ashes on your own land?
So bury, yes. So there are permits that are issued by the state or the county that would allow individuals to actually bury on their own land. They're few and far between. Most people don't know that is a possibility, an option for them to do and handle, but it can be done. The only problem that they will have once they do that, especially a burial, is that they have to disclose that has happened on any time they try and sell the property. So the only way around that is to exhume the individual and move them with them when they move to another state or to another home. So it has to be disclosed in burial. Cremation, not so much. When you scatter ashes, no, people place cremated remains in their flower gardens, their gardens all the time. It's not, there's no permit on that. You just have a permit for the cremation. What you choose to do after the cremation, so long as it's within legal bounds, and that's perfectly legal there, at least in this state.
So I may have missed it in your explanation, but if these people, if they do bury an individual on their property, and then they were to sell or move the land, sell or move to a different home, and the new buyer knew about it, if the new buyer was okay with it, do they not have to exhume, or do they always have to?
Nope, they don't have to, but they just have to disclose it. And then at that disclosure process, I think they would then turn around and have that discussion as to what was going to happen with that body that's been buried there. And so it has to be a mutual agreement between both. And I would think that the new owner would request that it be moved, because then he gets into a position if he chooses to sell it. See, and then if they say, I want it exhumed, then he's responsible for the exhumation, not the family. Yeah, I would never suggest that individuals, it's kind of a fun, not fun thing, but interesting thing to have a loved one buried in the same property that you're living on. But yeah, there are some legal implications that will come down the road if you choose to sell or move away.
Wow. This is stuff that I have never even thought about these. A lot of the questions that we've had in days or podcast episodes past, then I've kind of had a okay experience and feeling with, but now I feel like all of these are new. I have no idea. That is very, very interesting information. Terramation, aquamation even.
That's right.
All right, so we're going to leave a little more time for the story that Holly has today, but one last question that I've told is fairly important. I guess it was mentioned in a previous podcast episode. This is a question from Holly to Frank.
Oh.
And it is, has Frank ever fallen in an open grave?
Holly. So the answer, short and simple, is yes.
Long answer.
And, I will say this, and a lot of times if you go to an open grave site, a lot of times when you go to the grave site for the final committal service, it's already prepared. There's dirt. There's not dirt, but I'm sorry. There's planks that are placed around the open grave site so that you can walk along the side. And then there's a lowering device that the casket would sit on eventually, and that lowering device then lowers the casket into the grave. Well, on this one, and I'm going to share one. It's happened to me 3 times, but I'm only going to share one.
What?
Yeah, I know. Maybe I'll share the other 2 later. I don't know. But this one particular, I'll never forget, because the casket was being taken to the grave, and as the individuals approached it, we were cautioned by the cemetery crew that because of the rains the previous day, that the earth has been kind of weak and has been kind of faltering away or falling away. And so I thought, oh, okay. So I looked over and I saw the lowering device, and I thought the lowering device was on the grave. But they had actually made a mock setup to the side of the grave, which allowed the casket to be set on sturdy ground, as though it was above the open grave. So as I was leading pallbearers to the quote unquote open grave, I walked along a wide circle so I could go ahead and get around the lowering device, which was on solid ground. And as I walked on that green grass, down I went, bam. And everyone just stopped. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't know if they should be laughing, if they should, are you okay? Anything like that. But I guess the cemetery told me, I don't know that they said they told me that it was a fake grave setup, but I do remember the ground being told that the ground was giving way, and then maybe they just said that they were doing. I said, okay, well, we'll be careful. But so somehow or another, that conversation just kind of went through one ear and out the other. And so as I made that round or that long circle, wide circle around that lowering device, I thought I was being real careful for the pallbearers and stuff. And bam, we found the real grave.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a mock setup. So we set the casket on that after I was pulled out of the hole, put the casket on the mock setup. And then when I hadn't had the services, I think that's when I did hurt my leg, but not enough to where I may have even torn my pants. I don't remember.
Well, you didn't have to share that part, honestly.
I didn't say where it was torn.
Okay.
No, but yeah, that's one of the 3, and it's kind of embarrassing to actually talk about or to mention. So when Holly asked me the question, I immediately focused right on that one. I said, "Did someone talk to you about
You heard something?"
Yeah, but it even happens to funeral directors or people going out to the gravesite, and I guess you just have to listen to what the cemetery crew tells you prior to the actual burial, which I thought I'd heard. I thought it was clear, but apparently I was not.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that was in my mind is the recovery process from that. Not the physical, but the how do you recover from that? Not even emotional. That would be the most awkward thing in the world.
It is.
Yeah.
And it was. And my but the thing is, you try and save face. You know what I mean? When you fall, you immediately start, what do? You start doing push-ups. You're like, I meant to fall to the ground and start doing push-ups, or I slipped and fell on my back. Oh, look at the stars. Oh yeah, look at them. You just make up stories. But this one here, I just tried to get out of that hole as quickly as possible. But they were right. All the dirt was soiled. I couldn't get out of there. The pallbearers set the casket. As you're just looking up over the graveside. Okay, if you can picture this, I'm in the grave and I'm looking up over the grave. Just make your way to that metal thing, and then just have the casket set on the metal thing there. And then all the pallbearers come over and they start grabbing my arms. And if you're pallbearers out there and you remember this, sorry, but they're trying to pull me out of the grave. And oh my gosh, I almost pulled one guy in with me. Oh, and I said, let me go. And they let me go back into and they're ready to figure something else out. And so they're laying on the ground, like if they're holding on to me through a sheet of ice. They're laying on the ground and I'm trying to climb up their arms. Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah, it was terrible. And I'm kicking the soil, trying to push my foot into the sides of the grave, trying to make foot or steps so I can get some better leverage. But every time I push my foot into the earth sidewall, it would collapse on me. Oh my gosh. It was terrible. So after about a 15-minute struggle, I was finally out of the hole. End up immediately. I just laid there on the wet ground.
Yeah.
15 minutes of that.
Oh, terrible. We tried every angle of that hole to get out of. It was terrible.
If that happened to me, I'd probably look at the pallbearers and say, you know what, you can go ahead and just bury me now too.
Yeah. Put the casket on top.
Oh my word. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for dredging that one up, Holly.
Oh, it's so funny. I'm so glad
it is.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, we're going to give some time to the story that Holly has. But once again, please send in your questions. If you are a family friend, shoot us over a text. If you are a listener and don't know us personally, then email us at letsbefrank@coffintalking.com. Is that the address? Yeah?
Yes.
Good job, Scott.
Nice.
Awesome. So email us if you have any follow-up questions about any episodes that you're listening to. We would love to hear them. We would love for Frank to react to them as well.
If you have any embarrassing questions too,
There you go.
those are definitely welcomed. But yes, the story that we have today is from one of our most loyal coffiners, if I could say that. This is from Josh. I'm just going to give a brief explanation going into it. So he said that this is a story from a couple years back, and it was while he was living in a small town in northeastern South Dakota, a place called Watertown. He said it's very, very small, and he at this time was a missionary for his church and was just visiting people. But again, it's a very small town, very cold town as well, middle of winter. They were knocking on doors, talking to everyone that they could. But he said that Watertown is one of the most difficult areas of the entire mission, that the people didn't like them. And it was really just a test, honestly. So one day they got they had some luck and they met a family that was willing to talk to them. They visited once and eventually they invited them back. So they came back and they had some questions, and it didn't ultimately end very well because they had a lot of difficult questions. It kind of ended up being a Bible bashing moment, and so they said, we're going to leave. I don't think that we're going to be able to reconcile these differences. But a couple weeks later, they got a call from that family asking if they'd like to join them for dinner. So they didn't feel great about how the last discussion ended. So they thought that this would be a very nice way to form a bridge back with them. So he goes on, he says, dinner was extremely pleasant and the meal was delicious. I don't recall talking about religion during the meal at all, aside from them asking us how we've been doing the past couple weeks and what our daily activities were like as missionaries. Nothing contentious, nothing negative, nothing heated. After dinner, they said, "Why don't we go sit down in the living room? We have a few more questions for you." Again, another stack of papers come out. I politely said something like, "We're so grateful for such a kind gesture you've shown us tonight in inviting us over. Last time, it seemed like you might not be interested in our religion, which we completely respect. We'll do whatever we can to answer your questions to the best of our ability, but we might not have a satisfactory answer to every one of them. Rather than let things get contentious, we can just talk about some things we have in common and our mutual love for God and how he provides hope for all of his children." After 2 or 3 questions with answers they clearly weren't interested in, they decided to let us go, which we were relieved about. Before we left, they asked, "Can we say a prayer before you go? We love your prayers you've said at the end of our previous 2 discussions, and if it's okay, we'd like to offer a prayer for you as well." We were touched they wanted to pray for us, and we gladly welcomed this invitation. In their church, it was customary to kneel and hold hands as prayers were offered, so we all knelt down in a circle. She asked my companion to say a prayer for them first. He offered a short and sincere prayer. There was a great feeling in the room. Everyone had got along to that point, and we had a great meal, and the short discussion about religion had ended amicably. The wife smiled and said something like, "Okay, I'd like to say a prayer to you before we go. And I'm also going to pray in tongues. Is everyone ready?" He goes on to say, "I had heard about people praying in tongues before, and the stories varied wildly. I closed my eyes and I held hands with her on my right side. My companion was on my left side. He was holding hands with the daughter, who was holding hands with her brother, who was holding hands with her dad, who was holding hands with his wife. She started her prayer, 'Our dear Heavenly Father.' There was warmth in the room. Even though my eyes were closed, I could still perceive the light of all the lamps they had in the room through my eyelids. It was a cold winter night in Watertown where it started to get dark around 4:30 or 5 p.m. It was well past that time, so it was pitch black outside. But that room was light and the house was comfortable. She continued her prayer in English for a while, asking God to watch over us and protect us and help us spread our message to the people who needed it. I thought, oh, maybe she isn't going to pray in tongues after all. But still, I braced myself. Suddenly, she paused. What happens next still gives me a terrible feeling of fear and vulnerability. What came out of her mouth next was not gibberish, it was not humorous, and it was completely unexpected. What was being spoken was the most demonic, satanic, dark language I've ever heard. And it was exactly that, a sophisticated, actual language. It was not improvised nor rehearsed. It seemed to be an ancient Latin-like language. To the best of my recollection, it was full of V's and S's. Something to that effect. It was a language that was filled with hatred, even disgust. But it was not the language or the words that I was focusing on, because at that very moment that she started praying in tongues, one of the most vividly terrible experiences of my life started to unfold. As soon as she started speaking this language, an image of a giant, thick needle, maybe 8 inches long, with a giant syringe being pointed at my chest, was in front of my eyes. My head was bowed for the prayer, and even though my eyes were closed, I was looking down and I could see this needle right in front of me. As she spoke, the needle pierced my chest and was slowly being pushed into me. Once it was about halfway into my chest, smoke started to pour out of the needle. I remember I started to feel a heaviness in my chest and I struggled to breathe. I'm not sure why I didn't open my eyes at this point, but I just sat there frozen, unable to move. Everything was dark and cloudy. The light from the lamps that I had previously perceived through my eyelids was gone, and the image of this needle with smoke pouring out of the end of it filled my lungs with thick gray smoke, and it was the only thing I could think about. All I could think was to keep breathing and hope that the prayer would end soon. After what seemed like an eternity, but what in reality was probably 20 or 30 seconds, she stopped speaking this language and switched to English to quickly close the prayer. Relieved, I let go of her and my companion's hand and opened my eyes. I could not believe what I had just experienced. What happened next still haunts me even more than what had just occurred. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I looked over at the woman, maybe out of fear, maybe out of curiosity, due to what had just happened. As I looked over to her, she turned and looked at me. The woman had light blue eyes, but at this moment her irises were gone. There were just 2 big black circles staring at me, hollow, piercing, empty black circles, as if they were staring into my soul. A terrible feeling came over me again, as if I was staring into the eyes of a demon. We might not have looked at each other for more than 2 or 3 seconds, but again time seemed to stand still. This feeling of darkness, of being cemented to the position I was in, not being able to move, feeling trapped, all of these emotions just caused me to freeze. Then she blinked once, and her blue irises reappeared. They were back. The woman was back. Whoever or whatever was looking at me for those seconds was gone, in the literal blink of an eye. My companion and I left. The 20 or 30-foot walk back to our car was in complete silence. The only sound was the crunch of our boots in the snow, the scene lit by a dim street lamp, lighting a beautiful tree-lined lane. We got in the car slowly, closed the doors, and just sat there, wondering what had just happened. He and I never really talked about the experience after that night, but one thing was for sure. We never went back to that house.
Holy smoke.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Kind of creepy.
Oh boy. I am interested to hear your take on it, Dad, because mine is more from the kind of religious spiritual side of things, whereas yours could be more from the all experiences that you've had in relationship kind of thing.
Yeah, the one thing that pops into my mind when he said that the irises were no longer blue but were black, and I'm just wondering if the entire eye was black or if it was just the iris, because I have an episode that's coming up not shortly, but it will be coming up, where individuals have total black eyes, and there's no white to the eye at all. I'm wondering if that's the same type thing Josh experienced, or if it was just the iris. I'd be interested in knowing. But yeah, usually when eyes are like that, it's usually a sign of demonic presence. But I'm kind of intrigued, if that's the right word, by the vision he was having during the prayer, with him looking down at a needle piercing his chest. And it seems to me like that would be the avenue in which, if he gave any credence to the prayer that was being said, for that to be transferred into him. And so I just it was a very interesting story for me. Sorry that happened to you, Josh, but I'm so grateful that you shared it. But those are the two things I take away from it, as far as the vision or the imagery of the needle piercing the chest, because we all know the heart, right, becomes the soul of man. And if the needle is piercing the heart, I think that this entity or whatever was trying to tell him that, hey, you're pierceable as well. Mm-hmm. And so for him to just kind of brush that off like that, and to continue strong in his faith, then to look at her and recognize that probably was what was essentially trying to happen. I don't know. That's what I take away just from the reading. This first time I've heard this story. And so that would be my takeaway from it. And I'm no expert in any theme or type of in this situation at all, but that's what I took from the story. It was a very interesting story for me to listen to.
Yeah, definitely very interesting for me as well. And I think just to echo what Frank said, I am also not well versed at all in anything like that, but if you're familiar with, like, this was a religious setting, so I'll bring it back in, the certain scriptures that talk about your eye being single to, and if your eye is filled with light, then your body will be filled with light, and if it's not, then it's the opposite, kind of thing. And just an interesting reminder that there are those forces and there are those influences, and I guess you can choose to invite light, or in this case, darkness, and you might be deceived. You might think what is good is bad, and you might think what is bad is good. But that is a very interesting experience to have with that.
Yeah, kind of creepy. And I think that everyone at one point has had, even if it's just a feeling, if it's like, ooh, there's a weird, creepy feeling in this room. Like, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I want to be careful too, because I have a lot of friends when I was living in Houston that would pray in tongues, and it was always an uplifting experience. So not saying that it's always evil, but yeah, sometimes, whether it's the words that she was saying, or I don't know, maybe the feeling, or maybe something had been invited previously, but that is really, really creepy.
Evil or dark, I think is interesting. And I find it interesting too that she's the one that pronounced the prayer as opposed to her husband. And maybe there's some significance there as well. But I don't know. It's, yeah, there is that dark presence or essence that is around. And like Holly said, you can sense it.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully most of us do, and don't succumb to it. And I think that maybe this is what's happened to her as I'm listening to the story and what transpired in his recollection of the story. So yeah, it's definitely something that stays with you throughout. And people will say some of the episodes that we've done, and geez, Frank, is this even true? And I'm telling you, when you go through an experience like what we just listened to, you don't forget. And it's, yeah, and that's what I say to a lot of people when they ask me specifics about episodes that have actually aired. How do you know they were true? And I said, I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And so you never forget that stuff. So anyway, very good. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh, for sending that in. Maybe if you could reach out to us and let us know if the whole eye was black or if it was just the pupil or iris. That'd be kind of cool to hear about. But I think we'll just end it there. Thank you, Scott, for joining us, for bringing in those questions, gathering those. Again, if you have any questions for us, please send them in at letsbefrank@coffintalking.com or send us a DM on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any stories, also email us, send us a DM, send us a voice message, whatever floats your boat. But we'd love to hear from you. And
very professional.
Thanks. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, coffiners.
Bye, coffiners.
Thanks, Scott.